The following podcast contains explicit language because, frankly, I am tired of editing out Sonia's swearing. She cannot help it. It's a constant problem, and I'm just tired of dealing with it. So you've been warned.
Smith.
Here it comes.
Fuck you.
This episode of the Dorking Out podcast is brought to you by us. We are actually have produced a little video in association with friend of the show, Ben Waddell, about what is the real biggest movie of all time. We think you might enjoy it. We're going to have a link in the show notes to this episode. Also, the following episode is one of our year-end specials, and I have to caution you, I had a bit of a cold when we were recording this. I think I cut out all of the coughing, but if there's a little bit in there, I just have to apologize. I was crazy ill during the making of this episode. But now, enjoy the show. Enjoy our first part of our favorite stories of 2017.
Houston, flight is go.
Mila, let's go. SPM. Safety contact.
From Assignment X, Amalgamated Storytelling, and thesoniashow.com, it's The Dorking Out Show with Christopher Allen Smith and Sonia Mansfield. Welcome to episode 83 of Dorking Out, a podcast for people who like to dork out about stories and the stories and culture that we love. That means movies and TV, books and podcasts, and everywhere else we find stories that interest us. This is the top 10 stories we've loved of 2017, Part 1 edition. With me today is my professional writer and author of The Sonia Show, a blog about my creeping, crawling, impending, threatening cough, Sonia Mansfield.
Hey there.
Hey
That's
there.
a nice intro. With me today is my co-host, Emmy Award-winning filmmaker and nerd author and man with an awful, awful cough, Christopher Allen Smith.
Well, it's your intro, so I don't know why I started this paragraph.
I don't know. I thought you were going to start coughing again.
Over to you, Sonia.
In this episode, we're starting our year-end wrap-up with our top 10 stories of 2017, sort of. Like everything in Hollywood, we're all about sequels and world building. So we will share 5 of our favorite stories in this episode and another 5 stories in a later episode, probably the one after this. I know what you're thinking. Top 10 stories? What the hell does that mean? First of all, you watch your goddamn mouth.
Yeah, you watch it. Jeez. We'll find you and we will break you in half. We will make your boss watch you cry if you keep that attitude up, mister.
That's right. Thanks, tough guy. Second,
right.
Because we like to talk about all kinds of stories on this podcast, we want to mix everything together. So it's movies and TV, books and podcasts all together on one list.
Yes, exactly.
While everyone else is breaking them up by category, we're doing it this way because we're rebels, Dottie. We do want to mention that we are not professional critics, so we haven't seen some things that are kind of on a lot of people's 10 best lists because we don't get to see things in advance.
Yeah, like The Post or
so
Downsizing.
We haven't seen The Post.
Or Molly's Game or The Phantom Thread. Sorry.
Keep going.
Or Call Me By Your
else?
Name. Or Hostiles. Yes. Or The Post. Did I say The Post?
You said The Post.
If I didn't say The Post, The Post.
Yes. So,
or The Leftovers. Now that I think about it, if we get into TV, there's a whole nother list of things we haven't seen. Point is, we've seen.
It's not our job,
stuff.
you guys.
Yeah, it's not our job.
But we do the best we can.
Yeah. A, we do the best we can. B, we do a pretty goddamn good job. We do a fantastic job. You should listen to this podcast. And C, I don't know.
They're listening. If they're listening right now, they're listening.
Oh, right.
Don't be so mean.
You know, right? I'm sorry. I'm just, I got myself worked up. All right, Sonia Mansfield. Okay. Let's just jump right in.
I was just going to tell you to jump right in, but you want me to go first?
Yeah, why don't you go first?
Okay.
And it's fun because I have a suspicion you were going to hear us have a debate about what exactly the terms of this list are, because I'm seeing one of your choices which I like quite a bit, but I'm not sure it really counts on here.
Oh, okay.
Can you
So,
guess
well,
which one I'm
these
talking
these
about?
these aren't in like any particular order, but I'll start with the one that I think you have a problem with. Is it my podcast selection?
It is.
Why?
Now,
So, I wrote down here Pod Save America, which I love and started this year. So I don't see what the problem is
well, there's not really
with
a
it being
problem.
on my list.
There's not really a problem because it's your list. You can put whatever you want on the list. I'm just wondering does it tell a story? Is there a story within it? Because it's essentially like a news politics podcast. Is there a
Okay.
story there that counts? But this is just like I said. This is just us quibbling about definitions. So Sonia Mansfield. Now that I've said that, and now that I'm feeling self-conscious about saying that,
I'm
what
going
is
to
it you like
say,
about Pod Save America for 2017?
I mean, I guess it is telling a story, but it's a horror movie, really. It's a horror story about the current White House administration. What I love about it is it's basically keeping me sane right now, is this podcast. It is Jon Favreau, John Lovett, Tommy Vitor, and Dan Pfeiffer. They're all former Obama staffers. They used to do a podcast called Keeping It 1600, and now they do one called Pod Save America. And they just have such keen insights into the inner workings of the White House and the federal government. And I find them very inspiring and very hopeful. It's not just, everything is awful. They give great advice on what you can do so you don't feel so helpless. And I need that right now. And it's one of the podcasts that I'm listening to like immediately, like in my feed, like when it comes on, I'm like, yes. And I listen to it. I mean, technically it's not a storytelling vehicle, but it is one of my favorite things this year, so I put it on the list.
I hear you, and this is your list. So who am I to make judgments about this list, other than a man who makes judgments about everything? So why not this list? But
I mean, I could easily remove it and put
no,
something else on
don't
here.
do that. Don't do that. Well, and I think you're selling it a little bit short because Jon Favreau is one of the hosts of Pod Save America. So every once in a while, you'll get a little anecdote about his time hanging out with Vince Vaughn on the set of Swingers, or the struggles
Favreau.
that he had to go through casting Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. It's a great. And what his plans for
this Jon Favreau is a former Obama speechwriter.
Right.
I think they do have stories. I mean, they're not just like, and here's the news of the day. Like, they also tell stories about their time in the White House. I think it's worthy of the list.
That's true.
So
All right,
I stand by my pick.
All right.
What is one of your picks?
My pick, my first pick is a podcast, and I was thinking about this because I actually listened to a podcast driving up and down to the Bay Area for Christmas that would have made my list this year, but it came out in 2016 and I just missed it.
Oh,
the podcast is.
I'm like, we could make a whole separate list of that kind of thing.
Pretty much, exactly. That podcast was Into the Dark, and which is a podcast about the kidnapping of a kid in, I believe it was Minnesota, and the 27 years after the investigation and the bunglement, and it's an examination of, and it's one of those things like my choice for this year, where it takes a story, a true crime story. It begins with a true crime story and then kind of works its way out from just an interesting, creepy, true crime tale to examine larger issues about policing and the laws we use to govern ourselves and how societies react to tragedy and all this stuff. So Into the Dark is what I would say one of the best examples of a really well-made, broad-ranging true crime podcast. And
Will it make me cry?
Yes, definitely. You might
Oh,
not want to watch this, or you
okay.
might not want to listen
All
to
right.
this.
I might skip that one then.
But the reason that I'm going so far into the dark as an introduction to my first real choice, which is S-Town, is because S-Town was made by the people who did Serial. And I think a lot of people who started listening to S-Town when it dropped, I believe it was in April of this year, it seems just like a run-of-the-mill true crime podcast. It's got a lot of found audio. It's got a lot of interesting interviews. It's got a lot of kind of hints at what's going to come. It's very grabby. It's very sticky in terms of how it makes you want to listen to the next episode. But as the series goes on, it kind of goes out from what may or may not be a murder mystery, and it expands into a character drama and then to like a little historical examination of what it's like to live in the South. And it turns from one kind of podcast that you're almost sure you know what it's like to something completely different and wonderful and revealing and just a fantastic character study. And I got to tell you, I'm not usually one for character studies. I'm not usually one for here. Let's really delve deeply into this one person and tease out the mysteries of the universe through their life, because I think a lot of times when authors or storytellers try to do that, they kind of get lost in this one particular person, and it turns out to be not nearly as interesting for the audience as it is for the writer or the director. But S-Town, it's
It was so good.
I don't want to say
It's
too much
so
about
good.
it, because one of the great things about it, hosted by Brian Reed, is how you're 100% sure when you listen to the first episode, you know exactly where this is going, you know exactly how it's getting there, you know exactly the steps that are going to take you there. And every single one of those assumptions is almost certainly wrong. And where it goes, you're going to have no idea. And it is one of the most enjoyable rides in podcasting I think I've heard. So S-Town is my choice.
S-Town was on my original list, and because we kind of take a peek at each other's lists, I removed we kind of called dibs on different things so that we're not talking about the same things over and over. I gladly relinquished S-Town to you.
Thank you. What's your next one?
It very easily could have been on my list. It's easily my favorite podcast of the year.
Yes.
So another one on my list is, I feel silly putting this on my list because this is on everybody's list. Actually, a lot of mine are probably on everybody's list. But I loved HBO's Big Little Lies.
Yes.
I loved every single episode of that. I couldn't wait for the next episode. I was super, super into it. I thought Nicole Kidman was amazing in it. I thought Reese Witherspoon was amazing in it. I thought Laura Dern was amazing. Like, it's just, everyone's awesome. I love the story about these, like, all these moms whose children in first grade kind of get into like a squabble, I guess. Something happens with the kids in first grade and how it like ripples out into this bigger thing throughout the community. And it says so much about the relationships between women and the relationships between the husbands and the wives. And it talks about, rape and domestic abuse and extramarital affairs and about being like a step parent. And It's just really, really, really great. I was surprised to learn that they're making another season, but then at the same time, kind of not surprised because it won a million awards and it's got an awesome cast. And if you can get everyone to come back, why wouldn't you do another one? But I thought it was season 1 of Big Little Lies was one of my favorite stories of the year.
Let me ask you something about that. How do you feel? When I heard that they were doing a season 2 of Big Little Lies, I gotta say I was a little disappointed there's something just so
Yeah.
perfect about a contained series, that beginning, middle, and end. Just I don't know. It's
No,
one
I
of
was
those things where it's
disappointed
so
too
good that I'm
because
worried they're gonna mess it up.
it's based on a book, and as far as I know, the book doesn't have a sequel. So what are they doing? I also think it's so American of us, right? To be like, well, we can't just leave well enough alone. We have to drag everything out and make it,
Right.
something else. But like, I think that I was disappointed because I felt like they told a really great story, and I love the way it ended.
Right.
But like I said, I love the cast so much, and if they have a really good story, I totally want to see it.
Right.
So I'm trying to be open-minded, but a little part of me was a little disappointed. Like I like kind of what Fargo's doing, where they're taking the themes maybe, but like all new characters and telling those kinds of stories.
Right.
Like that I'm more interested in.
Right.
But I want to keep an open mind because like I said, I love this one so much. So I can be hopeful that the next season would be good too.
Right. All right. My next pick, I'm going to be short and sweet about it because we did a whole episode about it earlier this year. Now that I think about it, I think we've done a whole episode on nearly all of these. Anyway, point is, there are a few things in culture that, for me, are as valuable and as deeply rewarding as a new documentary by Ken Burns. Vietnam, his Vietnam War documentary that came out earlier this year was.
Don't tell me how it ends, okay? Because I haven't watched the whole series yet.
It ends with a rooftop shootout in Las Vegas. I'm not going to tell you who dies. I'm just going to tell you that it ends in Las Vegas, and it is spectacular. Anyway,
All
point
right.
is, it's like the helicopter shootout in Vegas from Godfather 3.
Got it.
Except it's just even more exciting and with more helicopters. Point is, this is my favorite Ken Burns documentary since his 1990s Civil War documentary that put him on everybody's map. This is one of the things that I love about PBS, that they put these kinds of resources into making prestige television about subjects and about moments in American history that I don't think, HBO is not going to drop $50 million to make a 20-hour miniseries on the Vietnam War.
No. They're going to drop $20 million on an episode of Game of Thrones.
That's right. And I think we can all be happy with both of those choices.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is there's something about PBS when it puts its shoulder to the wheel for certain pieces of culture that they produce things you're not going to see anywhere else that are valuable to us, unlike anything else. Ken Burns, when he's working at the top of his game, and he co-directed this with Lynn Novak, if I remember correctly. It's just amazing. And when you think about taking a subject like the Vietnam War and being able to tell the story from beginning to end in all its complexity, all its weirdness, all its horror, all of its tangled beginning, middles, and ends and meanings, and it's probably the event in modern American culture that has left the most lasting effects. That's a huge, very difficult undertaking, and when you can pull off a job that difficult at the level of beauty and grace and informativeness, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said informativeness. Now you're gonna have to throw out the rest of this endorsement because he said informativeness, and what the hell does he know? Who uses a word like informativeness? I can't listen to a man like this. Anyway, Ken Burns, Vietnam, it's great. You should watch it.
Well, I think that watching it now, where through like what's going on in this country, where this country's so divided. Like, it is really a country torn apart right now. And you think, God, this is the worst it's ever been. We've never been this bad. And then you watch something like Vietnam, and it reminds you, like,
right.
oh, there was a time when things were, where we were really divided. And
Right.
I don't know. It's almost hopeful in that way, I guess. I don't know.
Well, listen, until we have a president that's as bad as James Buchanan, every president in American history since Lincoln has got to thank their lucky stars for James Buchanan, because as bad as each and every certain president is from your point of view, none of them sat by while the Civil War began and twiddled their thumbs. So until a second Civil War begins,
well, we might be close.
We are always going to have we're always going to have James Buchanan to kick around. And you better be careful, Sonia, because with your love of gun laws, if a second Civil War gets going, I don't think your side's going to be
my side.
I don't think your side's going to have a lot of thing. And those gun laws from San Francisco, they're going to come back to get you.
You'll see. We have our ways here.
Which are what? What's your ways?
Dogs with bees. And when they bark, bees shoot out of their mouths.
That's good. No, that's good. I would be afraid if I were a resident of San Francisco that the few residents of Chico and Paradise, California, might actually march down there and be able to take over the whole city. But that's just my paranoid.
You underestimate us, sir.
Probably.
We will distract you with avocado toast.
That's right. So, Sonia, what is your next? What's your next choice?
So, my next choice is, I think, the scariest movie of the year. It is Jordan Peele's Get Out, which I just watched again the other night to confirm for myself that it is that scary, and it is legit scary. I don't know who these assholes are who keep saying it's like a thriller and not a horror movie. It's a horror movie. It's super scary. Did you see it?
I did see it. Actually, this is
because we did a whole episode about it.
This is where I need to confess, Sonia. We did a whole episode about it. I rhapsodically about what I thought, but no, I never saw it.
That's not true.
No, that's not true. I did see it. It was great. This is one of those where it would have been on both of our lists. Most of my movies, in fact, all of my movies, are going to be listed in the second half of this top 10 stories of 2017. But yeah, Get Out definitely could have been on the list. It's fantastic.
I mean, it's just so much about, it's just really smart about race and like liberal smugness, I guess.
Right.
And I just think it's genuinely creepy. And I think it's going to be a movie that you can watch over and over, and it'll give you something to think about. And, I know it's nominated in like Best Musical or Comedy for Golden Globes, and it is not those things, but there are some good laughs in there, but it's not a comedy.
Yeah.
But and we talked about this on our podcast, which really is like kind of the surprise that Jordan Peele would make this horror movie. And we talked about it before about, I'm not surprised at all, because so much of horror movie is similar to comedy films. Like, it's about timing.
Right.
And he obviously has excellent timing. Yeah. And it's a really, really great movie. And I have been begging other people I know to watch it, and they're being all resistant, like, I don't like scary movies or whatever. But it's more than that. It's so much. It's when people think of scary movies, they think of like, chainsaws and butcher knives, and it's just not that. It's something else, and they need to see it. It's awesome.
It is fantastic. It's great, and I am very, very excited that Jordan Peele is involved with the new Twilight Zone that's going to be coming to CBS All Access. I'm very interested to see the mind that can put a movie like Get Out together tackle something like the Twilight Zone. I'm just really excited to see what Jordan Peele does next. It's one of those things where he was one of my favorite comedians for years, and then he directs this movie. And I think we said this on the episode about it. Is one of my heartbreaks with Get Out is one of my favorite comedians is probably not going to be working a lot more as a comedian. He's off doing fantastic movies or probably fantastic TV shows, and just it's great. So yeah.
What is your next pick?
My next pick, I just realized, I think I might have been a little defensive, preemptively defensive when I talked about the Pod Save America, because my next pick is a comedy special.
I think that still counts.
It does, but it counts about as much as a political podcast counts.
All right, then.
My next pick
You're forgiven.
Is The Age of Spin. It's one of 4, count them, 4 Dave Chappelle comedy hours that came out or are coming out this year. The next one, his next 2 are going to drop on December 31st, so you may or may not have heard this by the time those come out. Anyway, point is, Dave Chappelle, for me, is one of the funniest comedians working. There's something about his timing, something about his observations, something about his presentation that is always just razor sharp, not an ounce of fat in it. It's just perfect. And it is one of the things is with all of these comedy specials that Netflix are putting out, in 2017, my understanding is that Netflix was trying to put out one comedy special per week for 52 weeks.
Crazy.
And one of the things that taught us was not every comedian can do it. That's maybe 20 hours too many. Which is, all of these specials, they're funny and they're good, but when you see, Joe Blow comedian with their hour, and then you flip over and watch Dave Chappelle's The Age of Spin, it's just like, oh, this is how a professional does it on his best day, and this is just how, a garden variety whatever does it on maybe their best day. Yeah.
Was it in The Age of Spin that he talks about taking his son to the Kevin Hart show?
Yes.
Because that one made me laugh so hard, where he talks about how Kevin Hart came out and just killed it.
Oh, God,
was just amazing. And he's like, he was hilarious and the crowd loved him. I was furious.
That's
to speak to the timing of Dave Chappelle, like the delivery of the line, I was furious. Is so funny. Like it just made me for weeks. Like I would just I was furious.
That's right. That's right. So, all of that stuff is in there, and it's funny because he did 2 specials. One being The Age of Spin. The other one I can't even remember because I love The Age of Spin so much. I think the other one was Live from Texas or something.
It does sound.
But the thing that I love about this one in particular is actually he talks about something that you and I have talked about on this podcast from time to time, which is how do you, with all the stuff that's going on with Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby and all of these performers or producers or whatever that put out things, is we have to wrestle. It becomes very easy to be like, oh, well, we're just going to write them off. They're going to be X'd out of pop culture and we're going to turn our back. Or like All the Money in the World, Ridley Scott pulled out Kevin Spacey's performance, reshot all those scenes, put in Christopher Plummer, and Kevin Spacey's been erased from that movie. And one of the things that I liked about Dave Chappelle, and I think there is a lot of the current outrage culture on the internet that you and I have talked about, I think we need to say this way, is white outrage about mainly white culture, and one of the, figures that's understandably been written out of the pop culture story is Bill Cosby for all the horrible rapes that he's done. But Dave Chappelle kind of wrestles with this in the kind of what Bill Cosby did in the 80s was something very important to African American culture and American culture. And his examination and humorous wrestling with Bill Cosby's dual legacies is just some of the most satisfying and fun and heartbreaking and meaningful stories in culture in the 2017. And his wind up to discussing Bill Cosby's rapes might be one of the funniest, and I know this is bizarre to say it this way, his wind up to that revelation seems like a 5-minute secret left turn wind up. So when it hits you, it is so funny because it is so bizarrely shocking, and we're all kind of used to living in this world where Bill Cosby is turned into this figure of infamy and sadness and just this grotesque caricature of what he used to be, and Dave Chappelle's wind up to that still gives you that this is what it was, this is who he was, remember this, and then he just clocks you with a bag of nickels on the side of the head, and it's funny and heartbreaking and sad and revealing all at the same time, and it's what I love about a really good comedian that is doing more than just trying to make you laugh, and when they're doing it at the level that Dave Chappelle is doing it, it's one of the best things out there.
What's the deal with grape nuts? There's no grapes. There's no nuts. And why is Bill Cosby raping people? I mean, come on.
Exactly.
You mean like that?
Exactly like that. In fact, Sonia Mansfield, for a moment there, I could not tell the difference between you and black comedian Dave Chappelle.
Yes, I get that a lot.
So
look, you guys, be on the lookout for my Netflix special.
That's right. So what is your
Speaking of things that are hilarious.
That's oh my God. Ugh.
I never laughed so hard watching The Handmaid's Tale.
Oh my God. So talk to me about The Handmaid's Tale, Sonia Mansfield.
It is probably my favorite TV series of the year. I was blown away by it, not just because of where it shows, like, I'm not going to phrase this right. I'm like, I almost need to start over, but.
You want to start over?
No. I got it.
Well, we're too deep in.
No, it's too late. It's too late. No, it is absolutely terrifying that this is like a future that, I don't know, you're like, that could never happen, but it's still really scary. And then I think it's around episode 3 or 4, they give you an episode that shows you how they got there. And that one absolutely terrified me. It's like scarier than Get Out. It is banana. Like, it shows like how like democracy kind of crumbled, and how like Elizabeth Moss's character goes from like, an independent woman with like a boyfriend or a husband and a kid to like being someone's property and being raped every month and being forced to have children. And it's bananas, basically, that episode. It is so scary to me because it gives you just a little bit of reality where you could see like, oh my God, that could totally happen. And that's so scary. And I love that. I've never read the book, but I love Elizabeth Moss's character in it. I love that she's a normal person. I love the voiceover narration in it. I know a lot of people are not fans of voiceover narration. I'm not always a big fan, but I like this one because she's so deadpan. And sometimes like her comments in the voiceover narration give it just a little bit of levity that sometimes the show needs, because it's really brutal and hard to watch sometimes.
Right.
But this is another one kind of like Big Little Lies, in that I started watching it thinking this is a 1-season thing. This is a mini series. That's what I thought it was. And then about halfway through, I was like, this isn't going to be a mini series. This is something more than this. And I'm very curious to see where it's going to go. I think it's everyone's really great in it. I think it's very scary. I think it's very sad. Alexis Bedell, sorry, from Gilmore Girls, who you hate. She's absolutely wonderful in this. Like, this is the best she's ever been. It's a really, really great show.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I did not mean to laugh at that. The thought of Rory from
Gilmore.
the Gilmore Girls imposed into this is, it's just, I don't, there needs to be a term.
With everything that's going on right now with like our, president that's been accused of, all kinds of sexual assaults, the whole Me Too movement, all these things that are happening, The Handmaid's Tale seemed very timely. Right.
Very lightning in a bottle. It's amazing because, it was written, shot, and mostly edited before the election.
Right.
So it's not like, I think when it came out, there were a lot of these think pieces. Oh, is this a response to the Trump?
Yeah, this is Trump. Yeah, no. Exactly.
No, it's
no.
Lucky timing. They were, I'm sure, almost all the producers, writers, directors, etc., cast were expecting this to come out in the age of Hillary Clinton. But it's a fantastic, horrifying. This is one of those movies, one of those shows, and I think there's been several of these this year for me where it's really good. I really like it. It really means something right now, but it's 20% too much for me.
Oh,
it's
okay.
Just, I don't think I finished the season.
That's crazy to me. I don't understand that.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying it's defendable.
But I think that, I could be the target audience for this kind of thing. I think Handmaid's Tale, Big Little Lies, and some other things that I'm going to talk about in our second half. Mm-hmm. These are shows that, I couldn't wait to get to the next episode. Like, these were never like the kind where I was like, I built up like 5 of them and watched them all in a row. Right. No, I couldn't wait for the next one.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was Handmaid's Tale for me.
That's true. So,
what's one of your picks?
My next pick is something that we're going to have to figure out a way to talk about this, because unlike I think every other pick on both of our lists, we have not talked about this at all on the show.
We have not.
It is, and this might be my favorite show my favorite comedy of 2017, and it is season 3 of Rick and Morty. We are definitely going to have a discussion about Rick and Morty on this show, and we are definitely going to have a discussion about what the F is going on with fans.
Oh, yeah.
Because Rick and Morty, well, let me just step back. Rick and Morty is a show on Adult Swim. It's from Justin Rowland and Dan Harmon. You may know Dan Harmon as the creator of the spectacularly great Community from way back when. But this is, Rick and Morty is essentially kind of like a grown-up version of what Marty McFly and Doc Brown's relationship would be like if they were grandfather and grandson having adventures throughout the universe. And they're flying around not just in a time machine, but in a extra-dimensional portal-skipping spaceship that lets them go into an infinite amount of universes at an infinite amount of times. And it is great. But what it is essentially kind of a examination of how people go through their lives. It uses a lot of science fiction tropes to discuss how does a person live a good life. What does it mean to live a good life? What does it mean to connect with other people? All with some of the darkest, most ridiculous, creepiest, most bitter humor.
This show, you've been begging me to watch the show, and I was like, I'm not watching that. Whatever.
Which I don't blame you for.
Well, then my husband started watching it. I think he got like 2 or 3 episodes in, and he's like, holy shit, Sonia needs to be watching this. So he stopped and was like, you need to watch this with me. So we have watched all the seasons now, and I can't believe that this show, like, you think it's going to be a bunch of, like, I don't know, fart jokes or something. You think it's going to be something stupid, basically. And instead, it's got this very Futurama like humor about it that's really smart. But then it's got even more than that, with like kind of like, like almost like some family drama and, you know, how we treat our family and who's our family and living with the choices that we've made in our lives.
Yes.
And it's bananas to me that this is a cartoon on Adult Swim.
Right.
You know, it's like, this is not the Family Guy. I guess I was like, oh, it's probably like the Family Guy, you know, and it's not that at all. It's incredibly smart. And sometimes like really dark, really, really dark.
Well, that's the thing is a lot of times when you say, oh, this show's really dark, it means like, wow, that's a really tough joke or whatever. No, this is philosophically, this is a horror show in a lot of ways. Like it's really like it's, you know, a show being dark is something we say sometimes to get people ready for a certain kind of tone or a certain kind of stressfulness or a certain kind of bitterness or whatever, or a certain kind of, you know, grown, you know, adult humor. That's not what this is. This is, you know, this is serious shit.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like that's season 3. Like, right? Because I feel like season 3 is like the darkest.
Yes.
Of all of them. And I was talking about it with my husband the other day, and, you know, because I was like, it does kind of remind me of Futurama a little bit. And I was like, and he was like, a little. And I was thinking of the episode of Futurama where Fry clones his dog.
Right.
Do you know this episode?
I do, but I'm only vaguely remembering it.
It's like the saddest episode of TV ever, where it shows like how the dog waited for Fry to come back and he never came back.
Right.
Like he's like sitting outside the pizza place and it's like raining and then it's snowing and it's windy and the dog's getting older and he's waiting for Fry, and it's like the saddest fucking thing you've ever seen. And like I felt like every episode of season 3 of Rick and Morty was like that episode of Futurama.
Yes.
It was so messed up.
Well, that's the thing that's so amazing about it is season 3. I love season 1, I love season 2, but season 3 for me was working on a whole different level.
It absolutely was.
It was kind of like all the potential, you know, a lot of times you'll hear like typically, you know, teenage boys, when they're really into something, they'll describe it and they'll gush about it and they'll love it and they'll whatever. And then when you watch it, it's kind of like, yeah, I see what you're saying and I'm glad you're excited about it, but this is not living up to the billing you're giving it. Rick and Morty season 3 is the show that teenage boys describe, but it really is that level. It really is that good. And the examination of kind of like divorce and family dynamics and how we treat people and is just so good, while at the same time having some of the most fun there's an episode that is essentially like a purge. I think I hope I'm getting that right. I think that's in season 3, where it's essentially kind of an examination of the purge. Then there's another one that's kind of Road Warrior. But the thing that's so great about Rick and Morty is, that episode of Futurama is kind of a famous episode. It's a famously sad, famously bittersweet episode that people talk about, and it's, oh my God, Fry doesn't come back for the dog.
Right.
Rick and Morty would have something that dark and sad and poignant as a throwaway gag in the background of some of these episodes. There's the storytelling on Rick and Morty is dense on a level that I don't think people are really prepared for. I don't think people are really used to, and it's spectacular. I think they took like a year and a half or 2 years to produce this season. And oh my God, it is just, you can see the time they put into every single episode. It is, for me, it's the funniest show on TV right now. It's the deepest comedy for years. This might be one of my favorite shows of all time. It is spectacular, but I will freely admit it's a show built for people like you and me who really like sci-fi and geek stuff and references and dry, bitter, ridiculous humor.
Yeah. Well, so I haven't been paying like a ton of attention to the fan, I guess, outrage.
Right.
Like, I know that a lot of fans, they don't like season 3 at all. I don't know what they expected it was going to be. And I also know that there's a lot of fans that super worship Rick.
Right.
And like want to be like Rick. And I was like, but Rick's a drunk asshole. Right. Why do you want to be like Rick?
Right. Well, I think a lot of them are kind of, one, I am suspicious that especially after the quote unquote backlash for The Last Jedi, I'm growing increasingly suspicious of backlash stories on the internet. Yeah. I'm sure there are some people that didn't like season 3 of Rick and Morty, but I'm not sure how many real fans of the show really don't like it. I mean, because everybody that I've talked to, and definitely my own opinion, which I hold to the most.
As you should. Who cares what other people think? Fuck them.
It is the best season of the show by a country mile. Like it has taken a quantum leap in quality, even though the first 2 seasons were already among the best television seasons on the air in the last 10 years. So yeah, we are going to have to, I'd like to get a guest. There's a guest that I have in mind that I'd like to bring on here to talk about it, because there are some fandoms, and I'm looking at you, Star Wars, Star Trek, and Rick and Morty, that are just insufferable. And I don't know what it is it almost, we saw this around the release of Star Trek Discovery. We saw this around the release of Star Wars, The Last Jedi. We saw this around the release of season 3 with Rick and Morty. It's almost like the hype train that gets built up by companies for these properties gets their fandom stoked up to a certain level where they just become impossible, or just, I don't know what. And they're so into their fandom, they're so into performing their love for whatever piece of pop culture that they're talking about, that they just become obnoxious beyond all reason. And Rick and Morty, when season 3 started, kind of went through a little something like that. So yeah, don't hold that against the show. Forget about
don't hold the fans against the show.
Exactly, which part of me is worrying, because I haven't heard any news on season 4 for Rick and Morty, even though supposedly the show is the biggest hit Adult Swim's ever had. I haven't heard anything about season 4, and I'm hoping that we get one.
I hope so.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Having said all
Fingers
that,
crossed.
Exactly. Sony Mansfield, what is your final pick for this episode?
My final pick for this episode is not a surprise, I'm sure. It is Wonder Woman. Probably one of my favorite movies, easily top 5 favorite movies of the year. I can't state enough how much Wonder Woman means to me and women going to see it. I watched it again recently with my husband, who had not seen it yet. And once again, Wonder Woman climbs that ladder and go out of the trench and goes into no man's land, and I start crying.
Yeah, that was
like every time. Like, the movie means a lot to me. Like, you know, we did a whole episode about it, so I don't need to go on and on. But I think Gal Gadot is absolutely wonderful as Wonder Woman. Like, she should be nominated for things. I think she won't be because it's a comic book movie, but she
Right.
should be. I think so much of why that movie works is because of how great she is and how much we like her and how much she juggles, like, being heroic and kind of naive, but, you know, and serious, but there's lightness to her too. And I think Chris Pine is really great in the movie. And I just love that movie. I even like the little things where, like, you know, one of the guys that they bring on their team, it turns out like he really isn't like the sharpshooter he used to be. And he's like, well, maybe I'm going to leave the team or whatever. And she's like, well, who will sing for us? Like, she just doesn't want him to leave, you know? And it's like this little thing, like, no, you do something for us. You do this, you know? It's very sweet. And there's all these little moments like that in what could have been a Justice League, you know, like a mess of a movie, basically. And, you know, I do think it has like some final act problems. It is like a big CGI cluster at the end.
Right.
But I still just super love this movie. And I know that there's a lot of other women that love it too. And I think I said this on our Wonder Woman podcast that, you know, women don't get like movies like this very often, like a movie about like a super powerful woman who just kicks this much ass.
Right.
And is so heroic. And like, I walked out of that movie like, I could do whatever I want. I could conquer the world. And I was like, this is how dudes feel all the time. This is how you guys feel all the time, right? You guys walk out of Spider-Man and you're like, yeah, I can do it all. Right?
No, but it's interesting. But I take your point and I agree with you. It's funny. Matt Reeves, do I have not Matt Reeves? I don't know. The guy that's worked in talks to work on the next Man of Steel talked about Superman, and he talked about the feeling and why he didn't like Zack Snyder's portrayal of Superman is because when you leave a Superman movie, you should feel like you can fly. So I totally get it. And I think Wonder Woman definitely hits that, and I almost burst into tears when Wonder Woman gets up on that ladder and does the no man's land thing, because there is a definite hole even with all of our comic book movies now of just simple superhero or heroic storytelling that a lot of times Hollywood's too cool for school, or they feel like they've done it before, so they don't want to do it again. But there are few pleasures in filmmaking as good as the moment when innocent people are going to be victimized, bad things are about to happen, there is no hope, and then Indiana Jones shows up with his whip, or Superman shows up floating outside, and and it's about, or Batman crashes in from the skylight, and the hero is there, and they are about to start kicking ass left, right, and center, and it is just one of the most fun thrills that you can have in pop culture, meaningful thrills that you can have in pop culture. And the only place I think that's doing it right and doing it at that level was Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman this year.
I think so.
So yeah.
I think if you went and asked people what some of their favorite scenes in movies are this year, I would not be surprised if 75% of the people said when Wonder Woman gets out of the trench and goes into no man's land.
Yeah.
I think it's a scene that everybody's pointing to because we want to see our heroes be heroic.
Yeah.
And that's why I love Wonder Woman. And that's why my husband bought it for me for my birthday. And I just love watching it.
Great.
It makes me feel awesome.
It's fantastic. It's great, and it makes me feel awesome too. What does not make me feel awesome, even though I love it like crazy, is my last pick for a show, and this is an example of maybe in another year, maybe if I was trying to cast the widest net for interesting, impactful, meaningful television that was on the air this year, I don't know that I would have picked this, because this show seems tailor-made for me to like because of the director that I like and because of the type of stories that I like. But Mindhunter from Netflix and director David Fincher is just, it almost seems machine engineered for me to like. And despite being that carefully calculated and that carefully tuned, which is something that I usually resist. If something is highly engineered and kind of pointed at me, I tend to resist it. But Mindhunter, which is the examination of the behavioral crimes unit or behavioral sciences unit in 1970s FBI, is just fantastic. It is really good. It is not really all that violent for a show about murderers and serial killers and the FBI agents that are trying to unravel the ways to stop these new waves of killing that were emerging in the 60s and 70s. You would think that would be especially on Netflix without the standards and practices of broadcast television to stop them, you would think it would just be a total horror show. But it's mainly a show about smart cops, smart detectives, smart criminologists talking things through and trying to figure things out and using their minds to push back the edges of our knowledge and figure out ways to help police, FBI agents solve crimes.
It's not all like blood and guts and, it's about using your brain.
Yes.
Which I like.
It was, it's fantastic. We did a whole episode on it, so I'm not going to go into it too.
I mean, all of the shows, like all these Criminal Minds, Cold Case, Bones, all that stuff, they're all based on like the work that these guys from Mindhunter did.
Right. Actually, it's funny. And keep going.
I think we talked about it on our podcast before. Like, I think we said it was like, it's the prequel to the modern procedural, basically, what Mindhunter is. And I don't know why. I feel like Netflix dropped the ball on this one. They didn't publicize it at all.
Right.
And I feel like I'm constantly like recommending it to people, and they're like, I don't even know what that is. And I was like, how do you not know what that is?
Interesting.
And I feel like there's some really great performances in there. And I need to look up the name to make sure I get the name right of the one I want to speak to. So please continue.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic thing. And I do think that there's a little bit of a drawback because there is a really violent graphic scene in the first 10 minutes of the show. So I think it gives off this impression that it is a hyper violent show. So I suspect some people that might have been interested kind of ejected, but they shouldn't have. And it gets better and better and better. It's one of those shows where as it goes on, each episode is better than the last until the final sprint is just fantastic. But the other thing is, it's funny we're talking about this, and I feel like I want to tell people that might not usually be into shows like this is Tom Harris, who created Hannibal Lecter and the Hannibal Lecter series of books, that Brian Fuller used as the basis for his show, the Hannibal Lecter show. That show
Is that what it was called? The Hannibal Lecter show?
the Hannibal Lecter show. I think it was called
It
Lecter.
sounds like a variety show.
That show is so violent. I am shocked it was on broadcast television. Like that, there are moments of that show that were so violent. I would not have expected them to be on HBO. Never, to say nothing of broadcast network NBC television. And so I just think it's so interesting that it is essentially the same subject matter, almost the same source files, provided the creative grist for both of these shows. One of them is, hyper violent and horrible to watch, although very poetic and very, people really love that show, being the Hannibal Lecter show. And then David Fincher, who made Seven, makes Mindhunter based off the same stuff. And it is really, it's just really satisfying. And the thing that people always forget with David Fincher, and I think it happens a lot in this show, is he's got some real humor that he puts in there. For as dark and grim and gritty as his movies supposedly are, and they are pretty dark and grim, there's a lot of subversive humor and a lot of lighter moments that I think he works really hard to have some humor in there, to make it palatable to watch. I mean, that's one of the things, and one of my other favorite movies of the last 10 years is Zodiac, and I'm constantly surprised, for as many times as I've seen Zodiac, every time I go back to watch it, how many real laughs there are in it.
Well, then it could be nominated for Best Comedy, Golden Globe.
That's right, it could. Oh, God, the Golden Globes are so...
So the actor I wanted to call out is Cameron Britton, who plays Ed Kemper. Kemper.
That's right. Yes.
Who is absolutely terrifying. At first he's not, he's all very jovial and friendly and like, here, let me tell you how I murdered all these people. And then, by the end, he's very, very scary.
Yes.
And
definitely.
I think he's absolutely amazing.
Yes. He is fantastic. The whole show is fantastic.
Yeah, and considering there's so many true crime documentaries, especially on Netflix, but they're on all the time, and there's entire channels devoted to true crime.
Yes.
I can't believe that not everybody is watching Mindhunter and talking about it.
Yeah. Well, I think there are. I'm with you. Anybody that we can evangelize to watch this show, we should evangelize to watch the show. I have seen it pop up on more than a few top 10 lists
that's
for
good.
TV, so that's good. But actually, Sonia,
Yes.
I'm going to leave our discussion for Mindhunter here, and there is one thing that I meant to talk about.
Okay.
That I wanted you to. You have some, not exact runners up, but you have some things that you picked out as particularly unappealing, unsatisfactory.
I didn't know if we wanted to do that in this episode. So,
well, you know what?
But we can. Do you want me to share some of my what I think are worst stories of the year?
Yes, because I have one pick that I am not going to say is the worst story of the year, but I don't know how to quantify it. So I want you to go first, and then I'm going to throw my pick out there.
Okay. Well, I wrote 2 down for this episode. I have more, by the way. But I threw out Alien Covenant, which I fucking hated. Hated it. It is so pretentious and boring. And I also really hated The Fate of the Furious, which you made me see for the podcast. I almost walked out.
Well, good news and bad news. You are definitely going to get one more of those series, and you are definitely not going to get one more of the other of those series. I think Fox has made it be known that they are done with the Alien series for quite a while.
Really?
Yeah, they have not said one word about the supposed sequel that Ridley Scott was getting going. They made it be known that they were disappointed in the returns for Alien Covenant.
Good.
So I would not be surprised if we do not see another Alien movie for years, if ever.
I hated Alien Covenant.
However,
Totally doubles down on everything I hated in Prometheus.
you are definitely getting another Fate of the Furious.
Well, that doesn't mean I have to see it.
That's true. No, I think we're done. This was the first year in quite a while I swore off a Transformers movie. And
Good job.
From here on out, we will probably not be going to see any Fate of the Furious movies.
Yay! That makes me happy because that was my first and last of those.
Right. So, what I wanted to bring up is I was trying to think about this and where to put this on my list or even to include this on my list because I think there was an achievement in television this year that we need to talk about, but that is not going on my favorite stories list, not going on your favorite stories list, but I think we would be remiss if we did not mention it at all.
Okay.
And that is Twin Peaks: The Return. I'm seeing it on a lot of year-end top 10 lists. I understand what these critics like about it, and I think having stepped back from kind of my hopes and wishes for it and kind of the hype as the show was coming to the screen, I am able to step away from a little bit of my disappointment as a Twin Peaks fan for what was provided. As somebody that likes TV, somebody that likes new ground being broken in TV and different ways of telling stories on TV, you know, after the millions of hours that have been produced for television and the existence of the medium, breaking new ground is insanely hard to do.
Yes.
And David Lynch, for the second time in his career, I think showed how to do TV in a new, different, innovative way. I think Twin Peaks: The Return is a kind of achievement that is very impressive, very mesmerizing to watch. And I think the Twin Peaks label was actually the thing that kept me from really enjoying it. And kept me from going on a ride because it's almost like the show that I wanted was kind of underneath the surface of a pond that I couldn't quite grab. I couldn't quite get there. It seemed like this thing that I wanted was just out of my reach, and every week it would kind of be shimmering there for a couple of hours, tantalizing me with what could be, but I never got it. You know what I mean?
Right. I appreciate the ambition of the show.
Yes.
I really do. And I was never bored.
Right.
And there are certain episodes that I really appreciated. Like, I like how they made me feel or they made me think, and some of them I didn't like the way they made me feel. And that was okay too. Like, because it made me feel something, but like, I didn't really connect with it. Right. And, I didn't put it on my list because it's just not something I see myself revisiting.
Right.
But also it is something that I think about still.
Yes. Exactly.
So, I'm like, maybe 2 years from now, I'll be like, I dropped the ball on that one and it's amazing. I don't know. Like, maybe if I sit with it for a little while longer, I will have a change of heart. But, I love Dale Cooper so much, and I wanted Dale Cooper and I wasn't going to get it. And that's okay. Like, not David Lynch's responsibility to give me what I want.
Exactly.
Like it's his art, and he can make it what he wants to make it, and I can choose to watch it and like it or not watch it, whatever.
Right.
And there is a lot to like in it, and there was a lot to think about, which I don't think a lot of TV does. Well, I'm going to change that. Let me rephrase that, because that's not true. I think there's a lot of great TV out there now that does want you to think, and I think that Twin Peaks was one of those.
Yeah, definitely. You know what? I think I figured it out. I've been trying to go for a metaphor to communicate the problem that I had with Twin Peaks, because what was produced was fantastic and mesmerizing, and I couldn't take my eyes off the screen for the whole 18 hours. And I think I figured it out. Is, for me, as a Star Trek fan, back in the 80s or whatever, there was a moment when they said, all right, we're coming out with a new Star Trek show. It's going to be set in a different time period than the original Star Trek show with Kirk, Bones, and Spock, but it's going to be new Star Trek, and get excited. And if the show that was produced was not Star Trek The Next Generation, but was 30 Rock with Tina Fey and Alec Baldwin and Tracy Morgan, that show, and if that was a show that was presented as a sequel to Star Trek somehow, that show is a great show in and of itself. That show is groundbreaking and innovative and crazy. But as a Star Trek fan, I would have been intensely frustrated if I was trying to put that show in the sequel to Star Trek show box. I don't know what David Lynch could have done. I wish he would have just named it something else. And if he had, it would have been easier to take in on its own terms. I think for me, 3/4 of the trouble I had with that show was just getting past the name and the tenuous connection with the original Twin Peaks show.
Right.
And I'm with you.
And then it was like they kind of inserted these like fan servicey things that maybe if it wasn't called Twin Peaks, he wouldn't have included.
Right. Exactly. And that's the thing is, and I'm with you, and I've said this in our Twin Peaks coverage, is Dale Cooper's one of my top 5 television characters of all time. And to get the chance to see him again, but never really see him again, is one of the most frustrating things that's ever happened to me in pop culture, which is, I guess that's, I'm with you. David Lynch doesn't owe me any of this thing, but it would have been great if I had been able to sit down and enjoy Twin Peaks: The Return on its own terms, and having it called Twin Peaks made that difficult.
Right.
But Sonia Mansfield,
yes,
before we end this segment and let our audience listen to part 2 of the best of 2017, is there anything else that you would like to say?
I'll just say Happy New Year and goodbye.
Bye. The Dorking Out Show is on Twitter at Dorking Out Show, where you can also find me at Jet Juergens and Sonia at The Sonia Show.
And you can read all about my random adventures at my blog, thesoniashow.com, and track the slow, creeping process of Chris's novel and his other hijinks at jetjuergens.com.
Yeah, you know what? Go right over there right now and see how much is going on jetjuergens.com. Anyway, it'll be fun. It'll be like a trip back to 2016. Anyway, you can find out more about the Dorking Out Show at dorkingoutshow.com, and while you're over there, you can support us by giving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Please, for the love of God, for some reason, Apple Podcasts holds our destiny in their hands, so go over there and give us a rating, please. Sorry.
We would do it for you. We have a handy link on our website. It'll whisk you right over there so you can gush your love all over us.
This is disgusting.
It's disgusting.
Why did you write it like
I think
this, Sonia?
you
I
wrote
didn't
like
write
that.
it like this. I don't write this.
We would gush love all over you and your podcast.
Yeah. we would do that. Anyway, point
Gushing.
is, I think we might be re-recording this here in a moment.
Gushing.
Jesus. What kind of podcast are you turning this into?
One that people will listen to.
This has been a presentation of Rocket Spots Media.